The sound of gunfire echoed through the dusty streets of Silver Creek as Olivia Farrow ducked behind a water trough, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. It was 1878, and the Wyoming Territory was no place for a woman alone, but circumstances had forced her hand. Now, as the infamous outlaw Silas the Snake Jenkins leveled his revolver at her hiding place, she realized those circumstances might just be the death of her. "Come on out, Miss Farrow," Silas called, his voice carrying across the now deserted Main Street. "Your brother's debts are due, and I aim to collect one way or another." Olivia pressed herself harder against the wooden trough, the front of her blue calico dress already soaked from the splashing water. Her fingers dug into the mud beneath her, searching desperately for anything she might use as a weapon. Finding nothing but dirt, she closed her eyes and prayed for a miracle. The sound of spurs jangling made her eyes snap open. Through the gap between the trough and the ground, she saw a pair of well-worn leather boots stepping deliberately into the street, placing themselves between her and Silas. "That's far enough, Jenkins," a deep voice commanded, steady and unflinching. Olivia peered over the edge of the trough to see a tall man with broad shoulders standing with his back to her. His stance was wide and confident, one hand hovering near the holstered gun at his hip. A dusty Stetson hat sat atop hair the color of wheat fields in late summer. "This ain't your business, Lawson," Silas spat. "The lady owes me and I'm here to collect." "Miss Farrow doesn't owe you anything," the man Lawson replied. "Her brother's debts died with him." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. How did this stranger know about Thomas? Her brother had been dead less than a week, found face down in Wolf Creek after a poker game gone wrong. She'd barely had time to bury him before Silas came calling, demanding payment on gambling debts she hadn't even known existed. "I won't ask again," Silas said, raising his gun higher. "Step aside." No, the single word hung in the air between them, heavy with defiance. Olivia saw Silas's finger tighten on the trigger. Without thinking, she leapt to her feet. "Wait," she cried. Everything happened in a blur. Silas's gun shifted toward her newly exposed position. The man called Lawson lunged sideways, placing himself directly in the line of fire. The shot rang out, impossibly loud in the deserted street. Lawson staggered, then crumpled to the ground. Silas laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that froze Olivia's blood. He began to advance, stepping over Lawson's motionless form, but before he could take 3 steps, the fallen man's hand shot out, grabbing Silas's ankle. In the same fluid motion, Lawson's other hand drew his revolver and fired upward. Silas Jenkins dropped like a stone, clutching his chest. Silence descended on Silver Creek's Main Street, broken only by the rasping breaths of the wounded men. Olivia stood frozen for a moment before rushing to her defender's side. "You're hurt," she said, kneeling beside him in the dirt. The man grimaced, pressing a hand to his left shoulder where blood seeped through his shirt. "I've had worse," he said, though his face was pale beneath his tan. His eyes, the clear blue of a summer sky, locked onto hers. "Are you all right, Miss Farrow? How do you know my name?" She asked, tearing a strip from her petticoat to staunch his bleeding. "Wyatt Lawson, madam, new deputy in town." He attempted to sit up, wincing with the effort. "Sheriff Carson sent me to find you after we got word Jenkins was looking to collect." Olivia helped him to a sitting position, acutely aware of his strength even in his wounded state. "Well, Deputy Lawson, it seems I owe you my life." Wyatt's lips curved into a pained smile. "Let's get patched up before we start tallying debts, Miss Farrow." From the saloon doorway, townsfolk began to emerge, cautiously at first, then rushing forward when they saw Silas's motionless form and the wounded deputy. As hands reached to help them both, Olivia found herself reluctant to let go of Wyatt Lawson's arm. Something in his steadfast courage had touched her, awakening feelings she'd thought long buried after years of struggle and disappointment. Little did she know that this chance encounter would change the course of her life forever. Dr. Samuel Whitaker's office smelled of carbolic acid and herbs, a pungent mixture that made Olivia's eyes water as she paced the narrow hallway outside the treatment room. Sheriff Carson leaned against the opposite wall, his weathered face inscrutable beneath his mustache. "Sit down, Miss Farrow," he said gruffly. "Wearing a hole in my floorboards won't make the doc work any faster." Olivia reluctantly perched on a wooden chair, smoothing her ruined dress. "Will Deputy Lawson recover?" "Wyatt's tough as old leather," Carson replied. Bullet went clean through his shoulder, painful but not likely fatal if infection doesn't set in. He studied her with narrowed eyes. "You want to tell me what you're doing in Silver Creek? Last I heard, you were teaching school back east." "I was," she admitted, twisting her hands in her lap. "Until I received word about Thomas." Understanding dawned on the sheriff's face. "Your brother always did find trouble, even as a boy." "He was all the family I had left," Olivia said softly. "I came to bury him properly and settle his affairs." "I had no idea he owed money to someone like Silas Jenkins." "Jenkins has been terrorizing 3 territories," Carson said. "Your brother picked the wrong man to gamble with." He straightened his vest. "What will you do now?" Before Olivia could answer, the treatment room door opened and Dr. Whitaker emerged, wiping bloodied hands on a cloth. "He'll live," the doctor announced without preamble. "Lost some blood, but the bullet missed anything vital. He's asking for you, Sheriff." His eyes flicked to Olivia, "And for the young lady." Sheriff Carson nodded and gestured for Olivia to precede him into the room. Inside, Wyatt Lawson sat on the edge of an examination table, bare-chested except for the white bandage wrapped around his left shoulder and chest. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks at the sight of his muscled torso and quickly averted her gaze. "Jenkins?" Wyatt asked Carson without preamble. "Dead," the sheriff confirmed. "Doc says your shot pierced his heart. He was gone before we got him here." Wyatt nodded once, his expression grim rather than triumphant. Then his eyes found Olivia's. "Miss Farrow, I'm glad to see you unharmed." "Thanks to you," she replied, finding her voice. "I don't know how to repay such a debt." "No debt between us," Wyatt said firmly. "I was doing my job." Sheriff Carson cleared his throat. "Speaking of which, you're relieved of duty until that shoulder heals, Lawson. Doc's orders." Wyatt opened his mouth to protest, but Dr. Whitaker cut him off. "At least 2 weeks of rest, Deputy. That means no riding patrol, no breaking up saloon fights, and absolutely no gunplay." "I can't just sit idle for 2 weeks," Wyatt objected. "You can and you will," Carson said firmly, "or I'll have the doc tie you to your bed." He turned to Olivia. "Miss Farrow, might I impose on you? Wyatt here lives alone in rooms above the livery. He'll need help changing those bandages and someone to make sure he doesn't do anything foolish while healing." Olivia blinked in surprise. "I am not sure that would be proper, Sheriff." "Mrs. Peterson at the boarding house has a spare room," Carson continued. "I'll arrange for you to stay there. You can check on our stubborn deputy daily without compromising your reputation." His expression softened slightly. "Consider it town business. We take care of our own here in Silver Creek." Olivia glanced at Wyatt, whose jaw had tightened at the suggestion he needed looking after. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared determination and pride. "Very well," she agreed finally. "If Deputy Lawson has no objection." "Seems I'm outnumbered," Wyatt said dryly, "but I won't be a burden to you, Miss Farrow." "Excellent," Sheriff Carson said, clapping his hands together. "Now let's get our wounded hero home to rest." The following morning dawned clear and crisp, with the promise of early autumn in the air. Olivia had spent a restless night in Mrs. Peterson's boarding house, her sleep disturbed by replaying memories of gunfire and Wyatt Lawson falling to the ground. After a simple breakfast, she gathered supplies from Dr. Whitaker and made her way to the livery stable. The stable owner, a grizzled man named Fletcher, directed her to the external staircase that led to Wyatt's quarters. "Deputy's lucky to have such a pretty nurse," he commented with a wink that made Olivia blush. She climbed the stairs carefully, balancing a basket containing fresh bandages and a pot of Mrs. Peterson's chicken soup. Her knock on the door was answered by a gruff, "Come in." Wyatt sat at a small table, attempting to polish his revolver one-handed, his left arm held awkwardly against his body. He wore a clean shirt, unbuttoned to accommodate his bandaged shoulder. When he saw Olivia, he hastily set down the gun and tried to stand. "Please don't get up," she said quickly, setting her basket on the table. "Dr. Whitaker was very clear about you resting. I've been resting since yesterday, Wyatt replied, though he remained seated. I'm about ready to climb the walls. Olivia surveyed the small but tidy room. A narrow bed occupied one corner, neatly made despite Wyatt's injury. A washstand, wardrobe, and bookshelf completed the sparse furnishings. She was surprised to see several well-worn volumes of poetry and history on the shelf. "You read Tennyson?" she asked, noting a familiar spine. A flush of color appeared on Wyatt's tanned cheeks. "When I have time, my mother was a schoolteacher before she married. She believed education shouldn't stop just because school does." Olivia smiled, warming to him further. "My sentiments exactly. I taught at a small school in Pennsylvania." "Past tense?" Wyatt asked, his perceptiveness catching her off guard. She busied herself with unpacking her basket. "I resigned my position to come west after learning of my brother's death. I had planned to return, but now." She trailed off, uncertain of her future now that Thomas was gone and she had no family left. "Silver Creek could use a teacher," Wyatt said quietly. "The town's growing, lots of families moving in. The children currently ride 5 miles to the next settlement for schooling." Olivia paused, a jar of salve in her hand. "Are you offering me a position, Deputy Lawson?" "Just making an observation," he replied with a small smile that transformed his serious face. "And please call me Wyatt. I think saving your life entitles me to some informality." "Wyatt, then," she agreed, surprising herself with how naturally his name fell from her lips. "And you must call me Olivia. Now, let me see that shoulder." The next few minutes passed in silence as she helped him remove his shirt and carefully unwrapped the bandage. The wound was red and angry-looking, but showed no signs of infection. As she cleaned it with warm water and applied fresh salve, she was acutely aware of his steady breathing and the warmth of his skin beneath her fingertips. "You have a gentle touch," Wyatt remarked, his voice low. "Years of patching up schoolchildren after playground mishaps," she replied, focusing on rewrapping his shoulder to hide her sudden fluster. "Though this is considerably more serious than a scraped knee." When she finished, their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. Olivia felt something shift between them, a connection forming that went beyond patient and caretaker. The moment was broken by a knock at the door. Sheriff Carson entered without waiting for a response, his expression grave. "Miss Farrow, deputy," he greeted them. "I've got news you both need to hear. Seems Silas Jenkins wasn't working alone. His brother, Victor, just rode into the territory, and word is he's looking for the man who killed Silas." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "And he knows it was Deputy Lawson." "News travels fast in these parts," Carson confirmed grimly. "Victor's as mean as Silas was, maybe worse, and he's got 3 men riding with him." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "When and where was he last seen?" 2 days' ride from here," Carson replied, "but that was yesterday." "I should leave town," Olivia said suddenly. "This is because of Thomas's debts. I won't have anyone else hurt on my account." "That won't solve anything," Wyatt said firmly. "Jenkins would still come for me and then hunt you down next. These men don't let go of a grudge." He looked at Carson. "We need to prepare the town." The sheriff nodded. "Already started. Deputized 4 men this morning. Will be ready if they come." "When they come," Wyatt corrected grimly, "and I'll be ready too." "You're injured," Olivia protested. "I can still shoot with my right hand," he replied, his blue eyes hard as flint. "And I won't hide while others fight my battles." Sheriff Carson sighed heavily. "I knew you'd say that. Just don't tear those stitches or the doc will have my hide." He tipped his hat to Olivia. "Madam, I suggest you stay close to the boarding house for the next few days. Mrs. Peterson's husband was a buffalo hunter. She keeps a shotgun behind the counter and knows how to use it." After Carson left, silence fell between them. Olivia helped Wyatt back into his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "This is all because of me." Wyatt captured her hand in his, surprising her with the gentleness of his touch. "No, Olivia. This is because men like the Jenkins brothers choose to live outside the law. You're not responsible for their actions." She looked down at their joined hands, aware of the calluses on his palm, evidence of a life of hard work and harder choices. "I've brought nothing but trouble since arriving in Silver Creek." "You've brought a lot more than that," Wyatt said softly, causing her to look up and meet his gaze. What she saw there made her breath catch warmth, admiration, and something deeper that she wasn't ready to name. "Now I believe you brought soup." The moment lightened, and Olivia found herself smiling despite the danger looming on the horizon. They shared the simple meal, talking of their lives before Silver Creek. Wyatt told her of growing up on a small ranch in Colorado, losing his parents to influenza when he was 18, and drifting through various jobs until finding his calling as a lawman. Olivia spoke of her childhood in Philadelphia, the death of her parents in a ferry accident, and her determination to become a teacher to support herself and her younger brother. "Thomas was always restless," she explained, sadness coloring her voice. "He came west 3 years ago seeking adventure and fortune. His letters were full of grand plans and schemes." She sighed. "I should have come sooner. Maybe I could have helped him before things went so wrong." "Some people are determined to find their own path, no matter how dangerous," Wyatt said. "You can't blame yourself for the choices he made." By the time Olivia left Wyatt's rooms that afternoon, the connection between them had deepened beyond mere gratitude or duty. As she walked back to the boarding house, she found herself thinking of his smile, the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, and the unexpected gentleness in his strong hands. Despite the danger approaching, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years' hope, and the first stirrings of something that might become more if given the chance to grow. That evening, as dusk settled over Silver Creek, Olivia sat on the boarding house porch, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the cooling air. The street was unusually quiet, the typical evening bustle subdued by the news of Victor Jenkins's approach. Armed men patrolled at intervals, their silhouettes outlined against the dimming sky. The sound of uneven footsteps drew her attention. Wyatt approached, his injured arm in a sling beneath his coat, his hat pulled low over his eyes. Despite Dr. Whitaker's orders, he wore his gun belt, the revolver secured in its holster. "You shouldn't be out," she chided gently as he climbed the porch steps. "Couldn't stay cooped up any longer," he replied, settling into the chair beside hers. "And I wanted to check on you." "I'm fine," she assured him. "Just watching the sunset." They sat in companionable silence as the last rays of sunlight painted the distant mountains in hues of gold and purple. Olivia was struck by how comfortable she felt in Wyatt's presence, despite knowing him for only 2 days. There was a steadiness to him that calmed her natural reserve. "Tell me about your school in Pennsylvania," Wyatt said suddenly. Olivia smiled, warming to the subject. "It was a small country school, just one room for all ages. I had 27 pupils last term, from 5 years old to 16. Her voice grew animated as she described her teaching methods, the Christmas pageant she'd organized, and the pride she felt when a struggling student finally mastered a difficult concept. "You miss it," Wyatt observed. "Yes," she admitted. "Teaching isn't just what I do, it's who I am." Sheriff Carson wasn't exaggerating about Silver Creek needing a teacher, Wyatt said. "The town council has been trying to raise funds for a schoolhouse and teacher's salary. They've nearly reached their goal." Olivia turned to look at him, studying his profile in the fading light. "Are you suggesting I apply for the position?" "I'm suggesting you consider your options," he replied, meeting her gaze. "Silver Creek is growing. It's becoming more than just a mining town. Families are putting down roots here." He paused. "It could be a good place to start fresh." The weight of his words hung between them, carrying implications beyond mere employment opportunities. Before Olivia could respond, a rider came galloping down the main street, pulling his horse to a sliding stop before the sheriff's office. "They're coming." The man shouted, loud enough for everyone on the street to hear. "Jenkins and his men, they'll be here by morning." Wyatt was on his feet instantly, his injury seemingly forgotten. "Stay here," he told Olivia firmly. "Mrs. Peterson will look after you." "Wyatt, you're wounded," she protested, rising to stand before him. "You can't face 4 armed men in your condition." His good hand came up to touch her cheek briefly, the gesture so unexpected and tender that it stole her breath. "I won't let them hurt you," he said simply. "Whatever happens tomorrow, know that meeting you has been worth it." Before she could respond, he was striding down the porch steps toward the gathering crowd. Olivia watched him go, her heart pounding with fear not just for herself, but for this man who had so quickly come to mean something to her. That night, sleep eluded Olivia entirely. She sat by her window, watching as the town prepared for the coming confrontation. Men moved barrels and wagons into defensive positions. Women and children were gathered into the stone-built assayer's office, the sturdiest building in town. By dawn, Silver Creek had transformed from a bustling frontier settlement into a fortress preparing for siege. As the first light of day crept over the eastern mountains, Olivia made a decision. She changed into her most practical dress, braided her hair tightly, and slipped a small Derringer pistol, a parting gift from her Philadelphia landlady, into her pocket. If trouble was coming because of her family's debts, she would not hide while others fought her battles. She descended to the boarding house dining room to find Mrs. Peterson loading a fearsome-looking shotgun. "Where do you think you're going, child?" the older woman asked, eyes narrowing. "To find Sheriff Carson," Olivia replied. "This is my fight, too." Mrs. Peterson studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Take this," she said, handing Olivia a bread knife with a wicked edge. "Keep it in your boot. If a man gets close enough that you need it, aim for the soft parts." The matter-of-fact advice from the genteel boarding house keeper might have shocked Olivia a week ago. Now, she simply nodded, concealing the knife as instructed. Outside, the morning air was crisp and still, the usual sounds of the waking town replaced by tense silence. Olivia made her way to the sheriff's office, where she found Carson, Wyatt, and several other men gathered around a rough map of the town. Wyatt looked up as she entered, his expression darkening. "You should be at the assayer's office with the other women and children." "I'm neither a child nor a helpless woman," Olivia replied evenly. "This situation exists because of my brother's debts. I won't hide while others risk their lives on my behalf." Sheriff Carson's mustache twitched in what might have been approval. "What can you do, Miss Farrow?" "I can shoot a Derringer, tend wounds, and I won't panic under pressure," she said firmly. "Put me where I can be useful." Before anyone could respond, a young boy burst through the door. Riders coming, 4 of them walking their horses down the main street. Everyone moved to the windows. Through the glass, Olivia could see 4 mounted men advancing slowly into town. The leader, a tall man with a shock of graying hair beneath his black hat, bore such a striking resemblance to Silas Jenkins that she had no doubt this was Victor. His face was set in a mask of cold determination as his eyes scanned the unusually empty street. "Looks like they're expecting a welcome party," Carson muttered. He turned to Wyatt. "You stay here with Miss Farrow. Your shoulder makes you a liability in a gunfight." "Like hell," Wyatt growled. "I can shoot fine with my right hand." "That's an order, deputy," Carson said firmly. "Someone needs to protect Miss Farrow if things go wrong." He looked at the other men. "Let's go. Remember, we try to talk first. I don't want a bloodbath in my town." As the sheriff and the others filed out, Wyatt's jaw clenched in frustration. Once they were alone, he turned to Olivia. "I need you to promise me something," he said, his voice low and intense. "If this goes badly, there's a trapdoor behind the desk. It leads to a tunnel that comes out behind the blacksmith shop. You take it and you run. Don't look back." "I won't leave you," she protested. "Olivia." He stepped closer, his good hand coming up to grip her shoulder. "I've only known you 3 days, but I know enough to recognize you're worth protecting. Promise me." The fierce protectiveness in his eyes made her throat tight with emotion. "Only if you come with me," she countered. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You drive a hard bargain, Miss Farrow." Outside, they heard Sheriff Carson's voice ring out. "That's far enough, Jenkins. State your business in Silver Creek." Pressing close to the window, they watched as Victor Jenkins reined his horse to a stop. His 3 companions, hard-faced men with firearms prominently displayed, flanked him. "You know why I'm here, Sheriff," Jenkins called back, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "I want the man who killed my brother." "Your brother died in a fair fight after attempting to murder an innocent woman," Carson replied. "The law's on our side in this matter." Jenkins's laugh was cold and mirthless. "The law, out here," he shook his head. "I'm the only law my family recognizes. Now send out Deputy Lawson or we start shooting." "Not going to happen," Carson said firmly. "Ride away now and no one else has to die today." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, with deliberate slowness, Jenkins reached for his revolver. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Carson and his men had positioned themselves strategically around the street, and their first volley caught Jenkins's men by surprise. One of the riders toppled from his saddle immediately. Another returned fire wildly before taking cover behind a water trough. Victor Jenkins remained mounted, seemingly unconcerned by the bullets flying around him. With deadly precision, he fired twice. One of Carson's deputies fell, clutching his leg. Another bullet splintered the wood of the hitching post the sheriff was using for cover. "Damn it," Wyatt muttered, drawing his revolver. "Stay down," he ordered Olivia before moving to the door. "Wyatt, no." She cried, but he was already slipping outside, keeping low as he moved from cover to cover toward the gunfight. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest as she watched the battle unfold. The third of Jenkins's men had dismounted and taken position behind an overturned cart, exchanging shots with two of Carson's deputies. The sheriff himself was pinned down by Victor's accurate fire, and Wyatt was working his way behind the water trough where the second outlaw had taken refuge. She saw Wyatt take careful aim and fire. The outlaw behind the trough jerked backward, his gun flying from his hand. One down. But as Wyatt turned to find new cover, Victor Jenkins spotted him. Time seemed to slow as Jenkins swung his revolver toward Wyatt. Without conscious thought, Olivia pulled her derringer from her pocket and rushed onto the boardwalk. The tiny gun had only 2 shots and limited range, but Jenkins was close enough. She raised the derringer and squeezed the trigger. Her shot went wide, but it was enough to distract Jenkins. His shot meant for Wyatt buried itself in a wooden post instead. Before he could fire again, multiple shots rang out from the town defenders. Jenkins's horse reared, throwing him to the ground. The third outlaw, seeing his leader fall, threw down his weapon in surrender. In the sudden silence that followed, Olivia found herself trembling from head to toe. Wyatt was at her side in an instant, gently taking the derringer from her hand. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "He could have killed you. He was going to kill you," she replied simply. His eyes held hers for a long moment, something profound and unspoken passing between them. Then Carson was calling for help with the wounded, and the moment broke as they rushed to assist. The aftermath of the gunfight kept everyone busy for hours. Victor Jenkins had survived, though badly wounded, and was now locked in the town jail awaiting transport to the territorial court. His surviving companion would join him. The 2 dead outlaws were laid out in the undertaker's back room, awaiting burial in unmarked graves. On the town side, one deputy had taken a bullet to the leg but would recover. Several others had minor injuries. Miraculously, no innocents had been killed. As dusk fell, Olivia found herself once again on the boarding house porch, her hands still faintly stained with blood despite repeated washing. She had spent the afternoon helping Dr. Whitaker tend the wounded, her teaching skills translating well to following medical instructions and providing comfort. The sound of boots on the steps made her look up. Wyatt stood there, looking exhausted but whole. He had removed the sling, though his movements were still careful. "Dr. Whitaker said you were a godsend today," he said by way of greeting. "Said you have a natural healing touch." "I just did what needed doing," she replied, too tired for false modesty. "How is your shoulder?" "Sore," he admitted, settling into the chair beside her, "but the stitches held." "Doc says I'm lucky." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as lamps were lit in windows across town. The normal evening routines were resuming, life continuing despite the day's violence. "I've been thinking," Wyatt said finally, "about what happens next." Olivia turned to look at him, suddenly anxious. "For the town, for you," he clarified. "Jenkins is going to prison for a long time if he survives his wounds. His gang is finished. There's nothing keeping you in Silver Creek now." The statement hung between them, weighted with unasked questions. Olivia considered her response carefully. "When I came west, it was only to bury my brother and settle his affairs," she said slowly. "I had every intention of returning east to my teaching position." She paused, gathering her courage. "But now I find myself reluctant to leave." Wyatt's expression remained carefully neutral. Because of the teaching opportunity here, Olivia met his gaze directly. Not only that, something flickered in his blue eyes, hope, perhaps, or relief. "I'm glad to hear it," he said softly, "because I find myself hoping very much that you'll stay." He reached across the space between them, his hand extended palm up in silent invitation. Olivia placed her hand in his, marveling at how right it felt, this connection with a man she'd known less than a week, yet who already meant more to her than seemed possible. "I can't offer much," Wyatt continued, his voice low and earnest. "A lawman's life is dangerous, the pay is modest, and I live in rooms above a livery stable." His lips curved in a self-deprecating smile. "But I can promise to be honest, faithful, and to stand between you and danger for as long as I draw breath." "That's quite a speech from a man who took a bullet for me when we were still strangers," Olivia replied, her voice catching with emotion. "I knew you were special from the moment I saw you," Wyatt said simply. "Some things you just know, deep down. I've spent my life trusting my instincts, and they've never spoken as clearly as they do about you." In the fading light, with the sounds of the recovering town around them and the memory of danger still fresh, Olivia made her decision. She leaned forward and placed her free hand against Wyatt's cheek. "Then I will stay," she said. "Because I trust my instincts too, and they're telling me that Silver Creek and you are where I belong." The kiss that followed was gentle, mindful of Wyatt's injury but filled with promise. It was the beginning of something, a foundation laid in the most unexpected circumstances. As they drew apart, Olivia knew with certainty that whatever the future held, they would face it together. The following weeks brought rapid changes to both Silver Creek and Olivia's life. The town council officially offered her the position of schoolteacher, with classes to begin as soon as the schoolhouse was completed, a process accelerated by the renewed community spirit following the Jenkins incident. In the meantime, she conducted lessons in the church 3 days a week, quickly winning the hearts of her students and their parents with her dedication and innovative teaching methods. Wyatt's shoulder healed cleanly, allowing him to return to full duties by the end of the month. His reputation had only grown after the confrontation with the Jenkins gang, earning him increased respect from the townsfolk and a raise from the county. He used the extra money to begin improvements on his quarters above the livery, adding a small sitting room and improving the kitchen area. Throughout it all, their relationship deepened. They took supper together most evenings, either at the hotel restaurant or at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house. On Sundays after church, they would ride out of town, exploring the beautiful countryside around Silver Creek. During these quiet excursions, they shared stories of their pasts and dreams for the future, building a foundation of understanding and trust. One crisp October afternoon, they rode to a high meadow overlooking the valley. The aspen trees had turned golden, creating a spectacular backdrop against the evergreen-covered mountains. They spread a blanket beneath a towering pine and shared the lunch Mrs. Peterson had packed for them: fried chicken, biscuits, and apple pie. "The schoolhouse should be finished by next week," Olivia remarked, watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. "Mr. Jenkins delivered the desks yesterday. They're beautiful, each one different, made from whatever wood he had available." "That's Silver Creek for you," Wyatt replied with a smile. "Making do with what's at hand, but making it special all the same." He hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about the future, Olivia." Something in his tone made her turn to look at him fully. "Oh," Wyatt seemed uncharacteristically nervous, running a hand through his wheat-colored hair. "Yes, you see, with your position secured and my duties as deputy being more established. Well, I've been thinking that perhaps it's time to consider a more permanent arrangement." Olivia's heart quickened. "What sort of arrangement did you have in mind, Deputy Lawson?" He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small object, holding it carefully between his thumb and forefinger. It was a ring, a simple gold band set with a single small diamond that caught the autumn sunlight. "The kind where you become Mrs. Lawson," he said, his blue eyes serious yet warm with affection. "If you'd be willing to take on a lawman with modest prospects but a heart full of love for you." Joy bubbled up inside Olivia, bringing tears to her eyes and a smile to her lips. I can think of no greater honor, she answered, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, Wyatt, yes, I will marry you. His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if made for her. It was my mother's, he explained as Olivia admired it. My father saved for 2 years to buy it for her. She would have loved you, Olivia. She always said I needed a woman with both spine and heart. I believe I have both, Olivia replied with a teasing smile, though the spine gets me into trouble sometimes. I wouldn't have you any other way, Wyatt said, drawing her close for a kiss that spoke of promises kept and a future bright with possibility. They were married 2 weeks later in Silver Creek's white steepled church, with the entire town turning out to celebrate. Sheriff Carson stood as Wyatt's best man, while Mrs. Peterson acted as Olivia's matron of honor. The schoolchildren formed a choir, singing hymns with such enthusiasm that their occasional off-key notes only added to the joyful atmosphere. Olivia wore a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Mueller, the town's seamstress, had worked day and night to complete. She carried a bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers gathered by her students. But her most beautiful adornment was her smile as she walked down the aisle toward Wyatt, who stood tall and proud in a new black suit, his badge polished to a high shine on his chest. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, spoken clearly for all to hear. They promised to love, honor, and protect each other through whatever life might bring, a commitment neither took lightly. Given how their relationship had begun with gunfire and danger, the celebration afterward was one Silver Creek would remember for years. Tables groaned with food contributed by every household. A band played lively tunes and dancing continued well into the night. Even old Mr. Finch, who claimed to hate social gatherings, was seen tapping his foot to the music. When it came time for the newlyweds to depart, they were showered with rice and good wishes as they made their way to Wyatt's, now their home above the livery. The rooms had been transformed through the efforts of the town's women, who had added curtains, quilts, and feminine touches to the formerly bachelor quarters. A wedding gift from the town council stood in the corner, a beautiful oak rocking chair with Mr. and Mrs. Lawson carved into the headrest. Alone at last, Wyatt gathered Olivia into his arms. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lawson," he murmured against her hair. "Home," she repeated, savoring the word. After years of loneliness and uncertainty, she had found not just a place to belong, but a person to belong with. "It sounds wonderful. It won't always be easy," Wyatt cautioned, ever the realist. "A lawman's wife faces worries other women don't." Olivia reached up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "And a schoolteacher's husband must endure endless recitations of multiplication tables and grammar rules," she countered with a smile. "We'll face whatever comes together, just as we have from the beginning." Their life together settled into a rhythm that suited them both. Wyatt continued his duties as deputy, earning a reputation for fairness and level-headedness that made him respected even by those on the wrong side of the law. Olivia's school flourished, growing from 12 students to 28 within the first year as word spread of her teaching abilities. They faced challenges, of course. Winter brought blizzards that isolated Silver Creek for weeks at a time. Spring thaws flooded the creek, damaging several buildings and requiring community-wide rebuilding efforts. And Wyatt's job occasionally brought danger to their doorstep, though nothing as dramatic as their first encounter. One evening in early spring, a year after their wedding, Olivia sat grading papers at their kitchen table while Wyatt cleaned his revolver, a nightly ritual that had become as familiar as breathing. Outside, rain pattered softly against the windows, creating a cozy atmosphere within their now comfortable home. "Mrs. Jenkins came to see me today," Olivia remarked, marking a particularly creative essay with an A. "Oh," Wyatt looked up, his hands stilling on the gun barrel. "How is young Timothy doing in his studies?" "Improving," Olivia said with a smile. "His reading has come along remarkably since we discovered he needed spectacles, but that's not why she came." She set down her pencil, suddenly nervous. She wanted to know if I'd be needing any baby things. Wyatt's eyebrows rose. "Baby things? Why would she think?" He stopped abruptly, his gaze dropping to Olivia's midsection, then rising to meet her eyes. Olivia, are you? She nodded, joy and apprehension mingling in her expression. Dr. Whitaker confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby, Wyatt, in about 7 months' time. The transformation of his face was something Olivia knew she would remember forever. Shock gave way to wonder, then to a joy so profound it seemed to illuminate him from within. He set aside his gun with exquisite care, then crossed to her in 2 long strides, dropping to his knees beside her chair to place a reverent hand on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Olivia asked, though his expression left little doubt. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Wyatt replied, looking up at her with eyes bright with emotion. "Olivia, you've given me more in this past year than I ever dreamed possible. A home, a partnership, your love." His voice roughened. "And now a child. I'm beyond happy, I'm blessed." The months that followed were filled with preparations and anticipation. The town embraced the news of the coming baby with typical Silver Creek enthusiasm. Handmade gifts appeared regularly, tiny knitted socks from Mrs. Peterson, a intricately carved cradle from Mr. Jenkins, a patchwork quilt sewn by the Ladies' Aid Society using scraps from every household in town. Wyatt threw himself into readying their home, adding a nursery to their rooms and building sturdy furniture with his own hands. He became almost comically protective, escorting Olivia to and from school and enlisting the older students to carry anything heavier than a book. "I'm with child, not made of porcelain," Olivia protested one evening after he insisted on carrying her laundry basket. "Humor me," Wyatt replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I've only got one wife and I intend to keep her in good condition." As Olivia's due date approached, the school board hired an assistant teacher to help with classes, allowing Olivia to reduce her hours. The extra time at home gave her opportunity to prepare for the baby's arrival and to reflect on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 2 years earlier, she had been a lonely schoolteacher in Pennsylvania with only her brother as family. Now she was deeply integrated into a community that valued her, married to a man who cherished her, and preparing to welcome a child who would be raised surrounded by love and support. The baby arrived on a clear October day, just as the aspen leaves were turning gold, almost exactly 2 years after Wyatt had proposed in that high meadow. After a labor, that Dr. Whitaker described as mercifully straightforward, Olivia gave birth to a healthy daughter with a shock of dark hair and eyes as blue as her father's. "She's perfect," Wyatt whispered, holding his daughter for the first time with a tenderness that brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "What shall we name her?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at the tiny face that somehow combined features from both of them, Olivia knew. "Hope," she said softly. "Because that's what she represents, hope for the future, born from the love we found against all odds." "Hope Lawson," Wyatt tested the name, smiling as the baby wrapped her tiny hand around his finger. "It suits her." As Olivia watched her husband and daughter together, she felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. The path that had brought her to this moment had been unexpected and sometimes dangerous, but she wouldn't change a single step of the journey. Word of Hope's birth spread quickly through Silver Creek. The church bells rang in celebration, and a steady stream of visitors brought gifts and good wishes in the days that followed. Sheriff Carson arrived with a tiny silver star pin, solemnly informing Hope that she was now an honorary deputy. Mrs. Peterson brought a christening gown that had been in her family for generations, insisting that Hope should wear it even though she had no blood connection to the Peterson family. "Family isn't just about blood," the older woman said firmly. "It's about love and belonging. And this little one belongs to all of Silver Creek." That sense of belonging extended to Hope's christening, which became a town-wide celebration. The church overflowed with well-wishers as Sheriff Carson and Mrs. Peterson stood as godparents, promising to help guide and protect the child throughout her life. Afterward, looking around at the faces of friends and neighbors who had come to share their joy, Wyatt slipped his arm around Olivia's waist. "Did you ever imagine this would be your life?" he asked quietly. "When you first arrived in Silver Creek?" Olivia shook her head, shifting Hope to her other arm. Never. I came here expecting to bury my brother and leave as quickly as possible. I certainly never expected to find a home, a husband, and such happiness. Even though your introduction to town involved being shot at, Wyatt teased gently. Perhaps especially because of that, Olivia replied, her voice softening as she looked up at him. Because that's when I met you, the man who literally stepped between me and danger without a second thought. Wyatt's expression grew serious. I'd do it again in a heartbeat, Olivia. For you, for Hope, for the family we've built, whatever it takes to keep you safe. I know you would, she said, reaching up to touch his face. That's who you are, but I hope you never have to again. So do I, he agreed, pressing a kiss to her palm. I much prefer our quieter adventures these days. Life with a new baby brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Sleepless nights were balanced by morning smiles and tiny milestones. Hope proved to be a good-natured baby, quick to laugh and slow to cry, with a curiosity about the world that reminded Olivia of her students' eagerness to learn. By the time Hope was 6 months old, Olivia had returned to teaching part-time, often bringing the baby with her. The students adored their teacher's daughter, competing for the privilege of holding her or making her smile during breaks. More than one parent commented that having a baby in the classroom was teaching the children lessons no book could provide. As Hope's first birthday approached, Silver Creek experienced another growth spurt. The railroad had finally extended a spur line to within 5 miles of town, bringing increased commerce and new settlers. The town council, recognizing the need for additional law enforcement, offered Wyatt a promotion to town marshal, a position with better pay, more authority, and slightly less day-to-day danger. It would mean more administrative work and less patrolling, Wyatt explained to Olivia as they discussed the offer one evening. Hope slept peacefully in her cradle nearby, one tiny fist curled beside her cheek. Less risk of ending up on the wrong end of a gun, but also less time in the saddle, which I've always enjoyed. What does your heart tell you? Olivia asked, knowing her husband's integrity would guide him to the right decision. Wyatt considered this, his expression thoughtful. That I've been fortunate to serve this town as deputy, but perhaps it's time for a change. Silver Creek is growing, becoming more settled. Maybe I should grow with it. He reached across the table to take her hand. And I can't deny that the idea of coming home to you and Hope without bullet holes in my clothing has its appeal. Olivia smiled, squeezing his hand. Then I think you have your answer. Wyatt accepted the position, and a formal ceremony was held on the steps of the newly constructed town hall. Sheriff Carson pinned the marshal's badge on Wyatt's chest with evident pride, announcing to the assembled crowd that he couldn't think of a finer man to ensure Silver Creek's continued safety and prosperity. That evening, a celebratory dinner was held at the Grand Hotel. The town's leading citizens gathered to honor their new marshal, but Wyatt seemed almost embarrassed by the attention. When called upon to speak, he kept his remarks brief and humble. I'm grateful for your trust, he told the gathered townsfolk. But a lawman is only as good as the community he serves. Silver Creek has become a place where people look out for each other, where neighbors help neighbors, and where strangers can become family. His eyes found Olivia's across the room, his expression softening. I know that better than most. I promise to do everything in my power to protect this special place we've all built together. As the years passed, Silver Creek continued to thrive, and the Lawson family grew along with it. 2 years after Hope's birth, Olivia gave birth to twin boys William and Thomas. The latter was named for Olivia's brother, a way of honoring his memory while creating new, happier associations with the name. The family moved from their rooms above the livery to a proper house on the edge of town, a wedding anniversary gift from the grateful citizens of Silver Creek, built with volunteer labor and materials donated by local businesses. The white clapboard home with its wraparound porch and picket fence became a gathering place for children and adults alike, known for its open-door policy and Olivia's fresh, baked cookies. Wyatt thrived as marshal, instituting fair but firm policies that kept the peace even as the town expanded. He hired and trained deputies who shared his values, creating a law enforcement approach that emphasized prevention and community involvement over punishment. His reputation spread throughout the territory, and he occasionally received offers from larger towns or even territorial government positions, but he always declined. "My place is here," he would tell Olivia after receiving such offers. "With you, with our children, with the community that gave us our start." Olivia continued teaching until the twins started school, then stepped back to focus on her family and community work. She never fully left education behind, however, serving on the school board and tutoring children who needed extra help. When Hope turned 10, Olivia began writing educational materials that were eventually published and used in schools throughout the territory. Through it all, the foundation of their life remained the bond that had formed in those dramatic first days, a connection forged in danger but built on mutual respect, shared values, and deepening love. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold to their children and eventually their grandchildren, though Wyatt always insisted that Olivia exaggerated his heroism. "Your father is too modest," Olivia would tell the children with a fond smile. "He literally stepped between me and a bullet without knowing anything about me except that I needed help. That's the kind of man he is." "I just did what needed doing," Wyatt would reply, echoing Olivia's own words from long ago. "Besides, it was the best decision I ever made. Look what it brought me." On their 25th wedding anniversary, the town organized a surprise celebration, transforming the town square into a festive garden with lanterns and flowers. Friends old and new gathered to honor the couple whose love story had become woven into the fabric of Silver Creek's history. Hope, now a poised young woman studying to become a doctor, had returned from medical school in Denver for the occasion. The twins, tall and handsome at 23, had temporarily set aside their respective careers, William as a lawyer, Thomas as a rancher, to help organize the celebration. As twilight fell and music filled the air, Wyatt led Olivia to the center of the square for a dance. Despite the silver threading through his wheat-colored hair and the lines that years of responsibility had etched around his eyes, he moved with the same quiet confidence that had first drawn her attention all those years ago. "Did you ever imagine we'd be here like this?" he asked as they swayed to the music, echoing the question he had asked at Hope's christening. 25 years later, surrounded by the life we've built," Olivia shook her head, her eyes bright with emotion. "That day when Silas Jenkins had me pinned behind that water trough, I thought my life was ending. I never dreamed it was just beginning." She looked around at their children, their friends, the town that had flourished under their care. "We've been blessed, Wyatt." "Indeed we have," he agreed, drawing her closer. "And it all started because a killer pointed his gun at you, and I couldn't bear the thought of harm coming to the beautiful woman with the courage to face him down." "My hero," Olivia murmured, only half teasing. "Always," Wyatt promised, sealing the word with a kiss that, even after 25 years, still held the warmth and promise of that first embrace on Mrs. Peterson's porch. Around them, Silver Creek celebrated not just their anniversary, but the enduring power of love that begins with a simple act of courage and grows, day by day and year by year, into a legacy that touches countless lives. For Wyatt and Olivia Lawson, that legacy was their greatest achievement, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful journeys. As they danced beneath the stars, surrounded by the community they had helped to build and the family they had created together, they were living proof that love, once found, could withstand any challenge and transform not just two lives, but an entire world.